Hey, how do I reach enlightenment? And how do I know when I'm there?
Are you paying attention this time? All right, so this is very important. It doesn't matter how anybody woke up subjectively. Tons of people have done it. But if it's subjective, it means it only works for them. If I reached enlightenment by stubbing my toe on a root, all of my students would be trying to stub their toe on roots. It wouldn't work. When I died, my school would die. So the only way to awaken that matters is to do it objectively. So this is how you do it objectively. I want you to imagine that you're a 3-story building. Why don't you pause and come sit next to me? So you're a 3-story building like this. And one half of the building we're going to call the personality side, and one side is the essence side. The essence means something that you were born with, and the personality was something that you needed to develop. So you have 4 centers in your mind. One is called the instinctive center. One is called the moving center. This is related to movement. This one's called the emotional center. And this one's called the intellectual center. Now, each one of these has 3 parts. And when you get 3 out of 3, you graduate. And that's how you reach enlightenment. Pause. So how you know that you've graduated all 3 parts is that the 3 parts are automatic, reactive, and controlled. So if your movements, the first ones you get are automatic, like, ooh, that's hot, I'm gonna move backwards. The second one would be reactive. So something happens, for example, I push you, you move to recalibrate, reactive. Controlled means I burn you, you don't move your hand, okay? When we, over, millions of years of evolution, our instinctive centers and our moving centers, for the most part, have 3 out of 3. Because of this, they don't have a higher moving center or a higher instinctive center. The final 2 pieces of your 3-story building are going to be the higher intellectual and the higher emotional. Now, when you are enlightened and you've activated these centers, the higher emotional center, because it's on the side that's essence, the side that you were born with and you don't have to develop, is you get something called conscience. And conscience means you know inherently what you're meant to do and what you're not meant to do. Now people say, oh, I must be enlightened because I already have this. Not technically, because that was given to you. But also you don't listen to your conscience. So you might as well not have it. Having something and using it are very different. We're not talking about having these properties. You were born with this one. But learning how to use it is where it gets tricky. Now, the only way that you can develop your higher intellectual center is if you get 3 out of 3 in the higher emotional, which you haven't even started to use yet. If you activate your higher intellectual center, you get 2 things. You get objective reason, which means that when you ask your mind a question, it gives you an answer, only one, and you don't question it. Right now, you ask your intellectual center something, it gives you endless reasons, and you argue with them, and you call that thinking. The other thing you get is something called impartiality, which means that you get to see the world through a clear lens, not biased from all the limitations that you've placed on it. You're not seeing the world as you, a human, you're seeing the world as God. So that's enlightenment, is being able to activate these centers by getting 3 out of 3 in the intellectual and emotional centers. Automatic intellectual, reactive intellectual, controlled mind. Automatic emotions, reactive emotions, controlled emotions. From there, you would start to have access to the upper centers. Now, here's the clinch. If you were to try to do this throughout the natural course of your life, there's like a 50% chance that on your deathbed, you would have access to these types of enlightenment, to your higher intellectual and your higher emotional. But there is a way to hack this, and this is how you do it. When a rocket ship is launching, it has all of this extra fuel. So to blast off, it needs a lot of fuel, right? But then what they do is they drop off those extra fuel tanks, and that shedding of that weight is what gives it the power to launch. If we force energy in each of these centers, 3 out of 3 in our moving, then, I'm sorry, 3 out of 3 in our instinctive, then 3 out of 3 in our moving, then 3 out of 3 in our emotional, then 3 out of 3 in our intellectual, and then drop them all, it will push the energy into those higher 2 centers. And if you know exactly what you're doing and exactly why you're doing it and exactly how it works, there's basically a ladder that's presented to you. You climb up, you get awakened. Now, being enlightened is like a BBL. You can get it, but you have to work to maintain it. But this is how anyone, anywhere could reach enlightenment. And this is what I'm doing in my free workshop, Mesoterica, which you can get access to right in my bio. So I'm sure you have questions about this. Go ahead and ask me now. So you say it's a little bit hard for you to follow because you're filming, but also it's a little difficult to follow. So let's look at this a different way. Personality, the side that you have to develop. Essence, the side that's given to you. When you're born with instincts. Like the kid instinctively knows to crawl towards the booba, and this is a result of thousands and millions of years of evolution. But the moving center, learning how to drink, the kid knows how to shit instinctively, born with that. But learning how to walk, learning how to hold a bottle, all of these things, that has to be developed, the moving center. You're born with emotions, and they get more refined as you grow up. This is on the essence side. You're born with emotions, born with automatic emotions, learning how to make them, you're born with reactive, but learning how to make them controlled is going to be the journey. But your intellect is something that you have to develop. Your reasoning function is something that you have to develop for yourself. And automatic, reactive, these things happen naturally as a part of evolution, but being able to do it in a controlled way is not your mastery yet. And if you're lucky, at the end of your life, you'll be able to control your mind and control your emotions and then have access to these 2 higher centers, but not always possible. Finally, you are born with a conscience. Does that make sense? But listening to your conscience, so many people just don't do this. They don't know how. And you can't cross over. You wouldn't be able to get from your instinctive, you wouldn't be able to get to your moving without your instinctive. You wouldn't be able to get to your intellectual without your emotional. You won't be able to get to your higher intellectual without your higher emotional. So it doesn't matter if you have it, if you don't use it. But when you have these 2 things, and you could have them very quick if you knew exactly what you were doing, why you were doing it, and how it needs to be done. But this just hasn't been something that's been made public before. So that's it.
Thank you.
You're welcome.